Good evening, you're listening to 87.7 BFM, and tonight is our fifth FTO debate of the week. This evening is for Vice President for Campaigns and Communications, with the three candidates this evening joining me here. To begin with, each candidate will be given a few moments to introduce themselves and their manifesto. Saba, would you like to go first?
Hi, I'm Saba. I'm running for Vice President Campaigns and Comms, as you well know, and I hope that you'll vote for me number one. My experience in media spans over about 7 years. I've been doing radio since I was in year 9, and I've been involved in many kind of radio stations and some newspapers. And here at Lancaster, I've been an active member of BFM. I'm currently the head of engineering and the treasurer here at BFM. And I'm also quite an active part of LA1 TV as well. I help with quite a lot of their outside broadcasts and some of the technical side of that as well. My manifesto is broken down into mainly 4 points. The first is securing student media for the medium to long term at least, making sure that there's sustainable funding out there for student media, making sure that student media have the support that they need when they need it, and making sure that there is a kind of technical point of contact for even the most basic things like tickets into facilities. My other manifesto point is expanding the availability of mental health support for our students here, making sure that they know what support is available and where they can go to get that support. Also, as a kind of sidebar on that, is expanding Nightline. I think there's a gap in Nightline, a really important service to students, to add ways in which they can contact Nightline, such as through instant messenger apps, things like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. My third manifesto point is introducing alternative food maps, so everybody can feel at home when they're in Lancaster. So things like a vegan food map or a vegetarian food map just highlight all the places on campus that sell different foods of different dietary requirements. It could be halal, kosher, etc. Just so everybody can feel at home here at Lancaster. And my idea is that eventually this could be expanded into town as well. My final manifesto point is our Roses coverage. It's a home Roses this time for this cohort of VPs. So I want to make sure that student media work together with their cousins in York, if you will, and really deliver a really good Roses coverage that is accessible to everybody. I also want to make sure that everybody who wants to be a part of Roses can be a part of Roses, regardless of who you are. If you want to be in it, you're more than welcome to be in it, and I really push for a campaign for that to be a thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Laura. I'm also obviously running for VP Campaigns and Communication, or otherwise we wouldn't all be here. So, a little bit about me. I'm currently the editor of the student newspaper Scan. I have been involved with Scan now for 3 years. I was deputy news editor, then the year after I was news editor, where I ran the FTO elections, debates, etc., interviews. Which is kind of weird, sending messages to people now that I was questioning last year, which was a bit odd. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also a active member of Boat Club, which I've been involved with for 4 years. I've been on the executive committee for that for 2 years. I held until yesterday the position of alumni relations officer within that. So have a lot of experience working with alumni and getting funding and things through that channel. So a little bit about my manifesto. So my manifesto's got 4 main points in it. So the first is I want to run the biggest and best Roses campaign that Home Roses has ever seen. So basically I want to focus on the societies and sports teams that are often overlooked during the process. So things like American football, lacrosse, Loo Dance, who perform every year but often don't have the biggest turnout. So I want to focus on those less generic sports, as it were, so not the footballs, the rugbies, etc., that people all know about. And I want to showcase their talent leading up to Roses. So I want to run probably about a 2-week campaign running up to Roses, every day introducing another team or society. So really making sure that every team gets their individual promotion So it'll be a day where one team, one society gets a full throw everything at, this is where they're going to be, this is what they do, this is how they play, etc. Possibly like give out like the rules and stuff like that. So some things like, so American football for instance, very, very difficult to understand if you don't know what's going on. Then also I want to make sure that the communications with sports teams and societies coming into the university, students understand how to sign up. So I want to make sure that it's really, really clear for them where they sign up, where they go for Freshers' Fair, etc. I had a conversation with somebody who told me that people hadn't joined their society because they didn't know that Freshers' Fair was a thing, which like for us is obviously such a shock, but it's a real reality that people don't know that that's how you actually sign up to things. So my second point is, similarly to Sabra, is sustainable funding for student media. So I want to work with all 4 student medias to ensure that they can continue to thrive and to produce the amazing work that they do. I also want to include them in the decision-making process as much as I can. At the moment, the current process is that they aren't able to be involved, they're not able to go to any meetings where the decision's made for any funding. So what I would like in an ideal world is for them to be involved in that conversation, so to actually be able to put their case forward to say, this is why I want this money, this is why we need this money, because they do. And if that isn't possible because university rules, etc., I would like them to be told as soon as possible. So last year, all of the medias were left pretty much in the dark until the end of summer with regards to their funding, so they weren't able to actually plan anything and stuff like that, so we were left in a little bit of a sticky situation, as it were.
Can I ask you to go through your next couple of points a bit quicker?
Yeah, go. That's alright, my other stuff's a little bit shorter anyway. So my third point is I want to run a 2-time campaign to reduce the stigma of mental health. This I would like also to increase training for friends and family. So it's obviously really difficult for people who know people with mental health, so increase the training there. Also, I would like to remove the use of the word problem when talking about mental health. So instead of calling it a mental health problem, remove that entirely from all campaigns. I'll talk about the rest of that stuff later. And my fourth point is just continuing the work with the opportunities for student media, so stuff like the media conference and stuff like that, and hopefully working with alumni to get better opportunities and also possibly then more funding.
Thank you very much. Introduction and manifesto.
Hello everyone, my name is Osarity Agawa. I was the previous BME officer, which is the Black Minority Ethnic Officer. Currently, I sit on the executive committee for the Ethnic Diversity Committee. I was also part-time officer for LUSU, so I've chaired quite a number of executive meetings at LUSU. So as far as LUSU is concerned, I'm quite conversant with their operations. Now, some of my past experiences as regards campaigning within Lancaster University is I've worked with a number of liberation groups, doing events such as the most recent Empower, Colorism, worked with UNICEF to a campaign for their food festival, worked with a number of ethnic groups, which is like the ACS, the Lithuanian group, Russian group, and so many others. You all know me when working with you. Well, today I'm here to tell you to come to vote for me as number 1 for VP campaigns and communications. And some of the reasons why I want you to vote for me is because, first of all, I noticed that there's a bit of a bridge between LUSU and the students in terms of students being able to express themselves. Currently, we have a petition and idea board, which is currently only available online, and not everyone knows about that. But that's one of my first plans. My first plan is to be able to make that more public so that students can actually pick up their ideas, pick up their petitions, and put them on the board, and LUSU can actually do what they're meant to do, and that's it, to cheer your campaigns for you and your ideas. Quickly summary, next thing my next agenda is what we call inclusive participation. Being in university for a while, not too long, I've realized that there's a bit of a lack of integration for the international students, postgraduates, and matured students. One of my agendas, if elected, is to be able to ensure that we create campaigns that are relevant to this category of people, even in the media, to ensure that there's a bit of a fair representation of other people's form of entertainment within those categories. Next agenda on my line is I don't know, most of you who have either been in either groups or whatever, because of the loss of the spine, it's become so difficult to campaign nowadays. One of my agenda is that if elected, I would love to be able to create a digital outdoor boards. Digital outdoor boards that will be put in specific category places whereby we'll be able to cut down on our paper waste and, most importantly, promote our events efficiently. I have quite a number of other ideas I would love to be able to bring to life, but for the sake of this interview, I'll just summarize it to just this. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. I've now got individual questions for you based on your manifesto points, so we'll kind of go around and do one at a time. So Sabi, can we start with you? You mentioned about these the food maps for
Yes.
students and things. Why do you feel that's a priority? So in your manifesto, it's one of the 4 key points that you've kind of outlined. So why was that such an important thing for you?
I feel like there's an increasing number of people who are trying to be vegetarian, whether that be for religious reasons or personal reasons or economic reasons. And I think it's less about specifically a food map highlighting what's where, and more to send out a message that Lancaster is home to whoever wants to call it home. So it's more of a statement wider than the physical map. It's an attitude that I want to change. That's not to say it's limited to food maps. It could be any maps. It could be anything that helps the student feel at home could be created into a map. Whereas, yes, the manifesto, I suppose, makes the food map specifically a tight point, but I'd like to convey that it's not just specifically about food maps. The maps, it's map making inclusion for all, and that's really what I'm trying to drive behind that.
Thank you. Laura, you mentioned in your manifesto and in your introduction there about sustainable funding for student media.
Yeah.
Kind of what form is that funding going to take place? In what sense will it be sustainable?
So what I'm hoping to achieve is, obviously I've worked extensively for the past 2 years with Boat Club to create a system where alumni are able to donate to Boat Club directly in return for benefits, etc. that they receive. People that leave the university, so all of us at some point, have very, very fond memories of the student media that they used to be involved with, and to not so at the moment you can donate directly to student media, but very few people are aware of that. So a lot of people donate directly to the university, which then gets spread around a number of different budgets. So what I would hope is they're currently as well working on a plan where the student media budgets won't include some funds. So some funds won't fall underneath the budgets, but they'll be put in a separate pot which won't be removed at the end of the year. So currently the budget at the end of the year, basically, if you've not spent your money, it's gone. So I'm hoping that with the introduction of that, being able to keep money over a longer period of time, student media will be able to save up funds over a period of time so that they'll be able to buy equipment and stuff like that. I was also, I think...
Could I just pick you up on one point? How much money do you expect the alumni to bring in?
It really does depend. So what I'm obviously pushing for first is the not getting the budgets cut. That's like my main priority, starting in, if I were to win, so starting in July, would be keep the budgets as they are or increase them. because obviously we're getting to a point, a lot of the student media, Bellrig and LA1 and Scan in particular, are getting to a point where they can't actually afford to continue to run as they are. So if they get cut anymore, then we're going to have to look at more sustainable resources, and that's obviously takes time. But yeah, a lot. It can be a lot anyway.
So you mentioned in your manifesto that a big part of what you want to do is lobby the university stronger to reduce things like international student fees and things. Obviously the Students' Union is already quite heavily involved in lobbying the university. Where do you feel they're going wrong in terms of the lobbying, and kind of what would you like to change? What would you change in the approach?
If you look at my manifesto, very clearly I said it said student-centered campaigns. So student-centered campaigns.
It was just on your manifesto. It's
on
specific.
The manifesto, I highlighted that point because that's something personal to me, because I'm an international student.
Yeah.
And these are things that I've been here for a while now, and I haven't seen any campaign about the incessant rise of international students' school fees. But that aside, the main point I was trying to drive at was the fact that with the petition and idea board, it will be clear and glaring clear to everyone that these are things that on the minds of students, and these are issues that should be campaigned heavily about. So yeah, on regards for the issue of international students fee, I personally haven't seen any campaign regarding that. Most recently, we had a campaign run by the student union as regards a recent rise of fees for home students. But in terms of international students, I don't think that was made mention in the campaign. Yeah.
But in terms of student union, in terms of meeting with the university, I mean, the student union already pushes, not necessarily in campaigns, but the student union itself already pushes for lower international fees. They are pretty much constantly lobbying the university. So what would you like to change about that approach?
You were just informing me about them doing that, but from the views of everyone, and as I said earlier on, I haven't seen that. You understand? But what I'm just trying to, as I said, if you look at one of my point says transparency in the union. So if you're doing something, let people know about it. The fact about you said international students fee. I'm an international student, and I've gone through their various form of medias, and I haven't seen any specific mention about that. So if they are doing that, fine, that's great. They need to keep us informed and let us know that we're actually speaking on your behalf. So yeah.
Thank you. Sabah, you mentioned with your plan with regards to roses, you'd like to improve accessibility for students to get involved in terms of student media and stuff. What kind of practical steps would you take to improve the accessibility?
It's about, for me, it would be when planning roses, we make sure we look at roses and the roses experience from every point of view. So we could always look at roses from a participant point of view, where making sure that we get the sports people down there and they're well rested for roses and they're prepared well for roses. But do we do enough to make sure that disabled students can participate in roses? Do we do good enough coverage to make sure that people who can't be there get good quality coverage of roses? I'm not entirely convinced that that's the case right now, and I think it's something we can do better.
In that sense, what do you feel is missing from the coverage and the access and things that makes you feel like it isn't accessible to all students?
I think there are certain things like we don't cover a wide enough range of sports. We focus on, as student media in particular, we always like to focus on the big headline sports. We don't necessarily focus on the smaller alternative sports that people perhaps want to see. We don't necessarily cover the participation of people that aren't who we first think of when we think of roses.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, it does in my head. I hope it is.
Laura, a big part of your manifesto was running a mental health campaign.
Yeah.
Two-term mental health campaign. Obviously, this is quite a popular campaign in terms of welfare in the past. It's run fairly consistently, both at the union level and on a college level.
Yeah.
What do you feel like you'll be able to do differently with this campaign that will address stigma in an effective manner?
So I really, I think with this is, I really want to push for training of both groups who deal with things with mental health, and also of individuals. So for me, going through a mental health issue is a really difficult thing for people around you to deal with that, and a lot of people don't understand how like, so if you were to have a panic attack, a lot of people wouldn't know how to deal with that. So for me, it's really, really important that people understand. So the main thing for me is getting it out there to show that yes, it is okay that you're going through these things, but also here's some help for you, to help you deal with the people around you as well.
So in practical terms, what does that kind of mean? So is that, in practical terms, what
Yeah,
does that
so
mean?
basically I want to work with the university. So at the moment the retention rate is 11, so the retention rate isn't particularly good. By the end of first year, 11% of students have already dropped out, which a lot of people don't know. But I want to work with the university, so speak to them about hopefully getting training from professionals who can come to the university and speak to people, and also what else did I write down? Well, lots of notes. Flick through. Yeah, so a permanent training service, and also then lobbying the university to increase the things that they offer as well. So at the moment, yes, they do offer a counselling service, but if you've ever tried to go through that counselling service, you'll know that your email won't be read for 2 weeks. You won't be seen for another 2 weeks. If you're going through a mental health issue, this is a real problem, and it's a real problem nationwide as well. Even with like the NHS, that's the same. So the current waiting list for CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy, which is how you deal with depression and anxiety, and a number of other mental health issues, PTSD. The waiting list on intense CBT is 21 weeks in Lancaster. So trying to lobby people to increase the amount of service and provision that they can give to us. So the university can give money, that's where they can help, and provide more counsellors and hopefully then move towards a quicker process.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So you mentioned with regards to student media that you'd like to make it a bit more accessible for disabled students.
Yeah.
Kind of what steps would you like to take to make it more accessible?
Basically, I was just more looking at it, especially from the angle of the L1 TV. So
Okay.
as a little as things like a transcription for those that are deaf, or probably sign languages for. And I actually understand the difficulties of being able to give that, but as I said in my manifesto, just simply being considerate. So if there are ways in which you think, okay, my disabled audience might not be able to partake in this, it's an ongoing thing. So these are just my ideas.
Yeah.
I feel we should always have it at the back of our minds. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Just for this next question, could I just ask you to keep your answers as relatively short as possible? If that's okay. Saba, you mentioned in your manifesto, and apologies if I misunderstood the manifesto, but you mentioned about alternative mental health support. Have I understood that right in your manifesto?
Not necessarily. It's okay.
When you
ask
kind of
a
spoke
question.
about, when you kind of mentioned that, what does that mean in that context?
So at the moment, if you search the university website for mental health services, it's quite limited, I feel, in its reach, and it's not necessarily fully accessible. I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach to helping people. So in increasing accessibility, an idea, and I've been asked a question, do you want to turn Nightline into a mental health service, where you help people that way? And that's not what I wanted Nightline to become. But I feel like Nightline could be a really good place for people to go if they need it. And so in terms of contacting Nightline, the main push is a telephone number, which you can ring.
Okay.
You can also Skype them, and you can also, there's an instant messenger thing on their website. Part of what I want to do is to increase the ways you can contact not just Nightline, but mental health services in Lancaster. And that would have to come as part of an increase in the mental health provision that the university provides centrally. So it would be including things like texting. There are sometimes you just don't want to talk to someone, or picking up the phone is a bit too much, or going to see someone in person is too much.
Okay.
So having an instant text messenger service would be really valuable, I think, and that's one of the main ways in which I want to increase accessibility to mental health services.
Thank you. Laura, you mentioned again in your manifesto about introducing work experience opportunities for students. How will you go about that?
So I've already spoken about how I'd like to increase alumni involvement. So a lot of the alumni from the university do have very, very good jobs in some incredible student media. So,
But given that a lot of those media already have their own routes for work experience opportunities, are they likely to be able to get individual work experience?
you'd be surprised actually how much leeway a lot of the people have. So recently I've been speaking to Warren Nettleford, who I interviewed for our 50th anniversary scan issue, and he works for a number of different news channels, and he said to me, send this person an email and then you'll be able to get some work experience through that. So yeah, they are very, very keen, and I've worked with a load of alumni that are happy to do that.
Thank you. Asas, you've been quite critical of student media in general, and you choose scan and things. Do you feel like that'll impact your relationship working with student media next year if you're elected to the role?
I wouldn't say I'm being critical per se. All I'm just simply saying that the things that people are quite or let me rephrase myself. Being critical in the sense that I'm saying what people are actually saying. And I don't think there's anything I've said that's actually negative per se. I'm just trying to say be considerate in the sense that this category of people I've made mention of are people I interact with, because those are people I'm most closest with. And basically, it's not an issue of being critical per se, but it's something to actually work on and improve on and make the media much even more holistic. If that makes any sense, because we're talking about we are Lancaster, and it's all about diversity, isn't it? And if we're saying we're a diverse university, then I believe it should not just be reflective on a campaign, but actually it should be as real as it gets. So being critical isn't saying you guys aren't doing a good job, because if you read my interview very well, we can actually commended the efforts of a lot of students media. But I'm just trying to say some other people are actually looking for some other form of content. So if you wouldn't mind developing some content that actually appealing to like the Asian communities, the Afro communities, simply things like that. Not being critical in the sense that they aren't doing a very good job, no, but just consider about other forms of media, basically.
I'm sure we'll come back to that later in the show. But we can just move on to the general questions. I'm going to ask all of you, and again, keep your answers relatively short, if that's okay. Questions to all of you. So the first one I'd like to ask is, obviously as part of your role in campaigns communications, you'll be running lots of campaigns. How will you go about assessing the success of those campaigns? If you'd like to start.
All right. One of my first campaigns was the issue of colorism, which is something that is quite dear to me because it's something that has personally affected me first. And for that first event, I think I had a turnout of about 60 people, which was fair enough. And as I said, I've gone through it, so I know the difficulties of running campaigns, getting students' attention, getting support from LUSU and whatnot. And most recently, the Empower event, basically just trying to encourage us to be more integrated and be more solidified.
But when it comes to those campaigns, how did you kind of assess whether they've been successful?
Well, how do I assess the success rate? First of all, we have what we call a review session with my committee members, whereby we sit back and we look at the level of interaction on the internet post the campaign. And also in previous events, we always try to do like a backtrack of seeing whether these issues we brought up are still being talked about amongst the concerned parties. And there's something we need to realize is that campaigns are not it's not just something you do and there's an immediate solution to it, but it's more or less to draw the awareness about it, and it's a continuous work towards whatever you are campaigning about, because a single campaign cannot eliminate an issue. Yeah.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, so I think the best way to assess whether or not a campaign has been good is to talk to people. I think you're not going to get a good view on how well you've done without actually asking the people that you've been targeting. So it's very difficult to get interaction from a great number of people, especially the way that the union is viewed at the moment, and a lot of people are disengaged with it. But I think going out into the square, I think that's been seen this year, with the VPs literally standing on the square and being like, what do you think of this? Like, did you think this was good? Did you see this? Like, those are the questions that need to be asked to the people that the campaigns are targeted to.
Saba?
I very much agree with what Laura said. I don't think there's an arbitrary way of measuring success of a campaign. In terms of, for example, if I could help just one person reach a mental health service, then I would, in many ways, deem that campaign to be a success. But the best way of talking to people, is talking to people. There's no point analysing Facebook clicks or stuff to look for an increase, because is an increase a success? There's too many different metrics. But talking to people, getting the word from the ground, seeing not just what they say, but kind of how they say it. If there's real feeling and passion behind it, that's a really good measure of how well they've interacted with the campaign. So I think what people say and how they say it.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's already kind of touched on a couple of times, I think, during the show. Engagement with the student union is a significant issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not something you're likely to solve in a single year, but kind of what steps would you take to improve the engagement with students? Saba, if you'd like to go first.
Just lay all our cards out on the table and say, look, students, this is what we do. You have a choice. You can choose to be a part of this. You can choose to be engaged with this. This is what we do, though. We have nothing to hide. This is what we do. This is how we do it, and this is how we involve you if you want to be involved.
In terms of practical things, what does that kind of involve?
It involves maybe having a dedicated section of the website which really details in layman's terms how LUSU is governed, how a campaign was ran, how much money was spent on a campaign, who was involved, and how students were also consulted and asked as to how they wanted to be involved and how they wanted to shape it.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Laura.
Yeah, it's interesting that Saba touched on the website, because at the moment, I think if people go onto the website, it's still in its very early stages, and it's not a particularly easy website to get its way around. I think there's some of the stuff that the VPs have done this year with videos on Facebook and stuff, so every week they'll be like, what are we doing this week? Like, what am I up to today? That sort of thing is really helps when trying to get engagement from students. So students don't want to read 20-page documents on the LUSU website. They don't want to do that because they're boring. And there's reams and reams of paper, etc. So doing more interactive things, making videos, even if they're really super cheesy, like, people love that. People like to have a laugh, like to laugh at the union, etc. So I think one of the biggest things that I would do is especially utilising social media channels to really try to contact more and more students, and just to get them to know what LUSU is. So if you ask a bunch of freshers, you can guarantee that a load of them wouldn't even know what the union was. So the first stage is make sure people actually know what it is, what it does, and where they can access the things they need to access.
Thank you.
My two contestants have actually touched on important points, but I'd also like to look at it from the grassroots level. So that's more or less working closer with the societies, with the liberation group, the activity groups, integrating them properly, and not necessarily making them feel alienated, but if possible, having a monthly meetings whereby you sit with most heads of either the liberation groups, or if it's the education reps, or if it's the activity groups, just more or less integrating them more about your activities. And then when you do that, those ones will be able to trickle down and spread more about your activities. So because I think it will be quite difficult for the student union to actually get in touch with every single student. But if we do it in classes, we'll be able to spread that information across the various students. So tackling it from the grassroots.
Okay, thank you. Could you each talk about kind of a campaign that you've run in the past, where you feel like it went well, what you feel was good about it, and what you feel was bad about it? Do you like to start? Campaign you've run in the past?
Okay. First, I think the most recent I'll just talk about, basically, because I'm more or less someone that's what drives me in life is all about a unity in diversity, and that was why we did the recent Empower event, and that event was basically just trying to like unify all sects of people, especially those that come from minor groups. So we're able to get some poets, got some really talented students to show off their talents and basically preach a message of peace and unity. And post the event, speaking to students and bodies, speaking to students, we got a lot of encouraging news and encouraging information from them. And it's, as I said earlier on, it's not a one-off thing. I hope to be able to do it more often, just so that we can have that a general sense of unity and peace amongst ourselves, basically. So, judging the success is, as I said, engaging and interacting with people, seeing the awareness via the internet, and hoping to constantly run it again, so that to instill that message we're trying to spread. Basically.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, I'm going to put my cards on the table, and I'm going to outright say I've never run a specific campaign in the same way that the union would. So an individual tackling an individual problem. But I have run a student newspaper, and I have had a lot of experience when it comes to actually getting a single entity to represent a style and stuff like that. So I don't think that me not having run an individual campaign would not benefit me.
In what sense then are you talking about the skills you can gain scanned kind of negate the fact that you haven't had an experience in campaigns? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, so I think with Scan, obviously, as the editor, I have a lot of influence on how the paper appears, how people perceive it. So I think that it's a similar sort of thing. So it's almost in itself a promotional piece of work, in the same way that a campaign would be, to try and get in contact with more people and try to get more people to be involved with it, try to get more people to read it, trying to get more people to actually engage. And I think that's a similar sort of thing that you'd experience with a campaign.
So?
I was part of a national campaign with Scouting to increase the involvement of young people in how their Scouting is run. It was a campaign, it was called U-Shape, it was a new initiative, and I was part of the team that spearheaded that, and the campaign went so well that it went from a initial national level down to a really local level, and young people up and down the country are being a part of these U-Shape forums, and they're really taking a hold of their thing. And it was really difficult to make sure that we got young people on board who were perhaps disconnecting with Scouting. And it was a real success that there were so many young people really motivated to take charge of their local Scouting again. But it was really difficult to get the right tone across and to communicate in the right ways, but we figured it out, and by keeping flexibility around, it was a campaign that worked really, really well.
Okay, thank you. This year we saw student media fees increase, membership fees increase. I just want to know your thoughts on that. Would you like to see them increase more? Would you like them reduced to the original rate they were last year? Sab, would you like to start?
I was initially against the increase in the student media membership fees, because I wasn't entirely sure about the reasons behind them going up. However, I think that student media membership still at £7 provides excellent value for money for students compared to what other societies charge for that. And student media membership, you are a part of 4 student medias. You're a part of Berwick FM, Scan, LA1 TV, and Take Two Cinema. So that money, I don't know where it's gone. That's a big question that we have here in the station. But if it is for the betterment of the student medias, then that is a good thing. Would I go about increasing it? I'm not sure. That would have to really be deliberated with members themselves to see what if they thought they were getting good value or not. And that would be any change in that would have to be spearheaded from a conversation with the members.
Laura?
Yeah, so I do know where the money's gone. It's sitting in a pot at the moment. We're hoping to use it for raises, for some stuff for that. With regards to increasing the fees, I would agree with you that yes, it's definitely a very good value for money. So LA1 is currently the second biggest asset the union has with regards to sports teams and societies, only second to Boat Club. And Boat Club members pay a considerable amount more, I can tell you, for the look after and the care of their equipment. So with regards to increasing the fees, I would say that at the beginning of the year we had this discussion, myself and the other heads of media, as to whether or not we should have it at £7, at £9, at £3, etc., whether it should be more than that, and I would have it at £9, and that was the decision that I chose at the beginning of the year, but then we obviously had a discussion and we were happy to settle at 7.
So just to clarify a couple of things, so we have 123 members in student media at the moment. Combined, they brought in £861.
Yeah.
So by raising it by £2 to £7 to £9, you'd gain. I'm trying to do the math very quickly in my head. An extra £200. Given that that's inherently going to put other people off joining student media, do you feel like you can really justify that? I mean, it could conceivably, very realistically, end up with no increase, and you get fewer people in student media and lesser engagement.
Yeah, I don't think that it would put people off. In my opinion, I think with regards to it being such a small increase, and the thing that would need to be done in the case of an increase again would be a transparency within the media. So this is where your money's gone. So this is where we're going to spend your money, and with a transparent list of prices, this is how much money you spent, this percentage of it went here, this percentage of it went here. That will obviously then help a lot with making people aware that the costs that they have. So there's £9 for the entire year. There's also the option, again, to split that cost over 3 terms, as a lot of other people do, which would be £3 a term. So don't get a coster one day, sort of thing. So I think just telling people.
Well, that question is quite it's a question that someone who's been behind it since, either at the managerial level or an administrative level, can actually tell the importance of the increase. I wouldn't be able to give you that information because I haven't been given a privileged information. So as regards knowing whether the increment was worth it, I can give you that answer to that.
Okay. Given that membership fees only account for about 7% of the budget, excluding the Roses budget, and given that it's going to potentially put people off, do you feel that's an issue overall?
Well, sometimes tough decisions need to be made.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when you know where you want to be, well, I wouldn't want to really comment much on that, Jamie, because I need to be given prior information and knowledge to be able to tell whether that's a good decision or not.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. We saw quite a lot of changes to Take Two Cinema this year, from their practices last year. Do you feel the changes have been the right ones? What changes would you like to implement in the future? Yeah, Sarah, if you'd like to go first.
I'm not entirely clued up on what these changes are, but from what I can see as a student, I'm not an active part of of Take Two, so looking at it purely from the kind of outside point of view, Take Two I feel has advertised less this year, and has really been less a part of kind of my knowledge. I always felt like I was aware of what was happening at Take Two, what films were showing, or how much it cost. And I feel like I've seen less of that this year, which has been a shame. In terms of changes to Take Two, I think making sure that their marketing is right and is out there and is appropriate is really, really important to get students involved and active in it if they want to be a part of it. I also think that there's a gap where societies can maybe book Take Two and organise a social down there. If that already happens, I think that should be promoted more.
Okay. Yeah, it does really happen. But, yeah, Laura.
Yeah. So I'm actually quite clued up on the changes that have happened to Take Two this year. As I believe it, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had a £13,000 loss last year.
Approximately.
Yeah, something around that figure, which is an incredible amount. So with the changes, I think they've been really, really good, really positive. I think what they were doing last year, which was have 3 different films, 3 different nights, which increases their cost by a lot. So they have to get licenses for all the films that they show. And if they're showing 3 films a week, that's 3 times the amount of cost that they would have every week, 10 weeks, 3 times as much. So yeah, I know that Rachel has been working really, really hard with them this year to reduce their costs, which I think is really, 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 really good. And they're very, very close at the moment to getting a profit, which is
so in terms of changes
great.
you'd like to make personally?
Yeah, so I don't think that with regards to costing and stuff like that, there are many things more that could be done. I would agree with Saba that the marketing this year hasn't been as good. I think the previous years it was a lot better, but I'm not 100% sure why that is, whether that came from Take Two or whether Lucy aren't promoting it enough. So I'd like to see it be promoted a lot more on social media through Lucy avenues next year.
Well, as for me, yeah, they both have said some very key points which talks about the promotion. But besides the promotion, I also think the ambience as well, because as personally some things some things I've heard from the grapevine and also things I've noticed. If we could just work a bit on the ambience to make it a bit appealing to students in a sense, because we need to realize that you are not just there on your own. You're actually competing with places like View Cinemas. So if I had the option of Take Two or View as a student, which would I rather go and which is worth my money? So probably just a little bit of tweak to the ambience to make it more competitive to other cinema houses around.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Thank you. I've got one final question, then we'll go into cross-examination. What are your thoughts on how would you go about ensuring the independence of student media? Of course, we had the big incident with Scan last year with the censoring the front page. So what steps would you take to ensure that the student media remained independent and weren't influenced too much by Lucy? Would you like to start?
Well, in terms of independence of the media, to a very large extent, I think, as we had earlier on said, if there are ways to generate more funding on our own, in the sense that not too reliant on Lusu and not too reliant on other people that can influence the media. As you can see, most of my experience has been more or less in the campaigning aspect of things per se. I've not been heavily involved with the student media. Yes, and even though I come to be able to even though I work with the student media to promote the campaigns I've run in the past, but in terms of being a staff within the student media, no, I haven't. But from a general a managerial point of view, I can say that if we can be able to generate funds more easily and give the media, as in each of the categories, more control over their how they use their funding, probably we'll be able to attend to some of these issues.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think this year it's been a lot better with regards to the relations with Lucy. I think that really depends on the person that sits in this role, because I think a lot of the time it really can depend on how they deal with this individual situations. So in this role, you are the head of all the media, and it's your name on that piece of paper if you get sued, or if somebody writes something defamatory, or somebody films something offensive. So having a good connection with student media and LUSU is always going to be a good thing. But with regards to independence, I think this year has shown that student media can be very independent and also run very well, but also require LUSU for that extra bit of support when it comes to things like legal advice, because we're not all media lawyers. We don't do that. I know that LUSU are also working, hopefully at the moment, to increase the number of solicitors that they use. So instead of having one solicitor, they are going to hopefully have a number of solicitors, so that we'll be able to turn to those for specific advice.
Thank you. So?
Berwick FM is special in a way because Ofcom largely dictates that Berwick has to be very neutral in how it broadcasts and very fair, so there's lots of rules governing like political debates and stuff. The other student medias are a little bit more under the influence of LUSU. I don't think, though, that student media should ever be scared of critiquing LUSU. LUSU should be prepared to put its hands up and say, you know what, okay, you identify something we don't do right, let's do it better. So student media shouldn't be afraid of pushing that boundary slightly. In terms of where LUSU kind of puts the line, legality is an obvious one, but having, in the past, this year's been really good, but in the past there's been a very, let's try and make sure there's going to be absolutely no complaints and everybody will always be happy with what we push out. And if you do that, you really are restraining the limits of what journalistic flair can come out. So I think making sure that Scan doesn't have to be afraid of an article that it publishes as long as it's legal. Berwick doesn't have to be afraid of news that it breaks as long as it's legal, is really, really important.
Okay. Thank you. Before we go into cross-examination, which we'll do very quickly because we're running out of time, there's a question sent in by Rachel Hughes, the current VP for Campaigns and Communications, and she said, do the candidates know the 3 lobbying points within the Freeze the Fees campaign? So if I get maybe one lobbying point from each of you?
One of them is the they want to run a what's the word? Not a conference, like a question and answer session with Andrew Atherton, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor. Is that one of them? I know one of the other ones, if you guys don't know it. Do you want to have a go?
Can't say.
Okay.
Do they want to freeze the fees?
The other one, do you know one?
No, go ahead.
No, if you
Go
know
ahead.
one, because I've already said something.
Go ahead. I'm starting the process. Go ahead. I don't have anything on mind now.
One of the other ones is that they want to freeze the fees, as you rightly said, at the point of entry. So that means that once students start the university, if they start on £9,000, they do all 3 years on £9,000. Or if they start on 9,250, they do all 3 years on 9,250.
Okay.
Is that one of them? I don't know. I hope that was one of them, because it'd be embarrassing if not.
We're nearly out of time, so we'll go to the cross-examining now. So if I ask each of you to ask one question of the other 2 candidates. Okay, Sab, would you like to start?
Laura.
Yes. Shoot.
Do you think that you would be able to be... do you think that your relationship with Scan would be closer than it perhaps would be for the other student medias?
No, I don't think so. I think, obviously, I love Scan, but I also really enjoy being on Berwick, being in LA1, and I think with the role being as time-consuming as it is, as I'm sure you've seen Rachel running around, it is very difficult to actually have a favourite. And I'm never going to go to somebody's never going to come to me and say, like, Berwick needs your help. I'll be like, nah, sorry, I'm down in Scan. So, yeah, I've always had a really good relationship with all 3 of the those student medias, and with Take Two as well. So I think I don't see any reason why. So I've got friends everywhere.
Would you like to question of both as well?
Your discussion of the student media in terms of increasing accessibility and creating content that reaches more people.
Yeah.
How would you go about that, given that currently the way Bellrig runs is that anybody can come and make a show on with what they want.
Yeah.
So currently we make radio that we like, and if someone else wants to come in that makes radio that appeals to them, they come in and do that. How would you go about making sure that that happens? Or would you make sure that happens, or would you leave it a choice for people to come and do
Thanks
that?
for that question, Saba. So as I said earlier on, that statement wasn't a statement that came from me. It's a statement that came from people. So in terms of when I mean people, I mean the category of people I've been mentioning. And since I heard that from them, I think I would approach them and say, you know what, if you feel content isn't relevant, would you like to contribute? You get what I'm trying to say. So in other words, engaging like at the PG board, engaging societies that work with this category of people to get content that actually appealing to them, and just as I said, engaging with the heads of those various category of people. Probably that's a way. I'm not saying I have all the solutions, yeah, but the most important thing is to work towards bridging that gap. Then what was your second question? I think you asked two questions, wasn't it?
Yeah. Would you keep it an option that the student medias, or would you make sure that the student media's created content that appeals to?
Yes, I would. If the few people I've spoken to feel that content is irrelevant, then I think the essence of the media is to be able to reflect the interest of the people. You understand? And when I mean people, I mean holistically. So yes, if you feel there's an issue with it, and when I mean issue, I mean if those category of people feel there's an issue with it, then I would encourage them. I wouldn't. It will still be optional, but it's what they call encouragement. If you can't fix it, then don't complain about it. But more or less encouraging people to actually participate within those categories so that it can be more accessible to everyone. Yeah.
Laura?
Yes,
What's next?
I will go.
So one question for each.
Yeah, Sabbath. So I'm interested with your stuff about your campaigns for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a lot about getting Nightline, instant messaging and stuff like that. Nightline already does have instant messaging, and they have it that way because of the privacy element behind it, so that people can message, so it's not a text. So from
I
a
know
phone
that
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what is it that you actually want to do with Nightline that will benefit them? Because I know that they had to close for 22 nights since the beginning of the year because they hadn't got enough trained people. So what is it that you actually want to do with the Nightline service?
Making sure Nightline is, first of all, open, but also, after making sure that it's open, making sure people know about it, and making sure that in every way possible people can contact it. So, as long as it's secure, obviously, and it follows the bounds of what is needed in terms of privacy, I still do genuinely believe that there are extra ways you can contact Nightline. It's giving people the choice. But first and foremost, making sure that Nightline is open.
How are you going to do that?
Well, we can't force people to be part of Nightline, but we can make sure that people are more aware of how you can be a part of Nightline.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe people think that joining Nightline is too big of a barrier. Maybe people feel like they couldn't be qualified to be members of Nightline. So communicating with them and making sure that they know what would be required of them and making sure everybody's expectations are realistic would, I think, be a really good way of encouraging people to be a part of Nightline and helping the Nightline be open to make sure people can actually use it.
Cool. That's what I was after. I'm interested, similarly, obviously, the two of us have got quite an affliction to student media. So I'm quite interested about why you think that the content within the student media isn't relevant, and on your manifesto,
I didn't say it's irrelevant. I said to some certain category of people.
So with regards to that, you said get involved with like the PG board and stuff like that. So SCAN this year actually ran interviews with the postgrad board, and we, in the same way that Bell Rig do and LA1 do, take shows. You take shows, we take articles from anyone. We have international articles every week. It's submitted to us about why people come from international places and stuff like that, and travel articles, recipe articles written from people all over the globe. And I'm also a little bit interested to hear why...
Keep it to one question if you can.
Just sort of twist on that with regards to the digitalisation of student media. I'd like to ask you... Okay, I'm going to choose this question.
Okay.
I'm going to choose this question.
Okay.
Why you think that student media should be digitalised, and do you not think that then that takes away from what they actually do?
Thank you very much, Laura.
Lots of opinions. Sorry.
Well, the idea of the digitalization of the media, it's basically trying to be more competitive with other student medias out there, because quite a number of other universities have actually been able to migrate more into a digital phase. And when I mean digital phase, most like LA1 TV and other are already more or less on a digital platform. But for like SCAN, to be good to be able to have applications, because I know to totally migrate from the tabloids to the application is quite an holistic task. But to be able to with the use of the application, we can be able to reach out to more people and get more people involved. So it's an idea that if we can work with the necessary bodies, because if you looked at my manifesto, I spoke about working with computer societies, ISS, because I noticed that even in previous manifestos, some other candidates have brought it up. If you go on the petition and idea board, it's one of the top ranking things there about digitalizing SCAN per se. So if it's something that people are talking about, then why don't we actually stop and consider the idea? So yeah, that's where the idea came from. And and in the question of what was the last, you said something about affecting the body. So was that okay? Probably.
I don't remember. I say a lot of things and just waffle on. So.
All right. So yeah.
Okay, great. That's if you'd like to go next.
I don't really have. I didn't prepare for this part. I prepared for first part, but yeah. Is it
okay.
necessary if I do?
No, we can move on if you'd like.
I really don't want to cross-examine because I haven't thought about certain things. But let me just ask them a few questions. For you, you have an experience with scouting in terms of campaigning. Now, as regards other sections of this school, in terms of the probably the groups, the activity groups, education reps, how would you, as the VP campaigns and communication, be able to integrate those people, those categories of people, if you want to run a promotion or run a campaign, or how would you reach out to them based on your prior experience?
I'm very much a believer that everybody has a choice, and that nobody is bound to be involved, but should anybody want to be involved, I will never ever stop them from being involved. So communicating with them, emailing them, letting them know what the situation is, and that my door is always open, my email inbox would always be open to them, their ideas if they want to meet, and I'm more than happy to work with them. So it would just be making sure that they know that if they want to be involved, they're more than welcome to be involved.
Would you like to ask a question, Laura?
Let me think. Yeah, for Laura, spoke about running a 2-term campaign for mental health.
Yeah.
This is actually, if you read most of the other welfare officers, this actually ideas that they all have in their manifestos talking about mental health. Is there, besides mental health, is there any other campaign you would want to work on, based on the fact that quite a number of the welfare officers are so passionate about this cause? So there will not be too much need for you, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So is there any other form of campaign besides mental health you would like to talk about?
Okay. If you can answer as quickly as possible.
Yeah, obviously I'm hoping to run a Roses campaign as well. So that would be working with activities, but just on the point of the mental health campaign, it would be working with the welfare officer and the college welfare officers as well, to try and make that campaign really as big and as powerful as it can be. Because this year, sadly, there's been a number of reasons why, but the campaigns that they've run haven't really been quite as punchy and as loud as they can be, which is why I stipulated in my manifesto that it would be a 2-term campaign rather than just like a couple of weeks or something like that. It would run for a long period of time, and therefore it would take a lot of effort with regards to campaigning and communication.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all three of you for being on this evening. Thank you very much for listening and or watching. Stay tuned, because in another 20 minutes we'll have the president debate. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Quite interesting.
Cheers, guys.
Cool. Thank you very much. Was that okay?